Imagine a pig. Not just any pig. A pig with a destiny. A pig that almost pulled two great nations into a shooting war. This is a real story. It happened in the middle of the 19th century. It involved the United States and Great Britain. And it all centered on a remote chain of islands in the Pacific Northwest. The year was 1859. The place was the San Juan Islands. These islands sit off the coast of what is now Washington State. They are beautiful, green, full of rich land, and they were caught in the middle of a border dispute. And America and Britain shared a long border. Most of it was settled, but this small corner was still up in the air. Both countries wanted these islands, and neither would back down easily. The trouble started with the treaty. The Treaty of Oregon, signed in 1846, was supposed to fix the border. It said the line would follow the 49th parallel west. Then it would go through the middle of the channel which separates the continent from Vancouver's island. That sounds clear, but it wasn't. The problem was there were two main channels. One was the Haro Strait, the other was the Rosario Strait. If the border ran through the Haro Strait, the San Juan Islands belonged to Britain. If it ran through the Rosario Strait, they belonged to America. This was no small difference. The islands were strategically important. They offered good harbors, they had rich fishing grounds, and they were a natural stopping point between the mainland and Vancouver Island. Vancouver Island was already firmly British. It had Fort Victoria, a major British outpost. Britain's claim was strong. The Hudson's Bay Company was a powerful British trading company. It had operations on San Juan Island itself. They had farms, they had settlements. They were there first, in a commercial sense. They saw the Haro Strait as the obvious main channel. To them, the islands were clearly British territory. But America had its own ideas. American settlers were pushing west. This was the era of manifest destiny, the idea that America should stretch from coast to coast. They wanted the land. They saw the Rosario Strait as the boundary. This would place the San Juan Islands firmly in American hands. And American settlers had also started moving onto the islands. They were building homes. They were farming. They were trying to make a new life. So you had two powerful nations, both claiming the same patch of ground, both with different interpretations of a treaty, both with people on the ground trying to live their lives. This created a lot of tension. It wasn't just a legal disagreement, it was about national pride, about who had the right to be there. And everyone knew that previous border disputes had almost led to war. The air was thick with mistrust. People were quick to anger. The stage was set for something to go wrong. Something small. Something that could blow up into something very big. And it did. All because of a pig. The pig incident happened on June 15, 1859. The main character in this part of the story was an American farmer named Lyman Cutlar. He was one of those American settlers trying to make a go of it on San Juan Island. He had a small farm, he grew potatoes. He was just trying to live his life. The other key player was Charles Griffin. He was an Irish agent for the Hudson's Bay Company. He managed their operations on the island. The company had a large farm. They raised sheep. They also had pigs. These pigs roamed freely. This was common practice back then, but it caused problems. Lyman Cutlar had been having trouble with pigs. Not just any pigs, Charles Griffin's pigs. They kept getting into his potato patch. This was a huge frustration for a farmer. Your potatoes were your livelihood, your food. You spent hours planting and tending them. To have an animal come along and root them up was infuriating. Cutlar had likely tried to shoo them away before. Maybe he'd complained. But the problem kept happening. On that particular day, Cutlar saw a large black pig in his potato patch again. It was rooting around. Eating his potatoes, he was fed up. He grabbed his rifle, he took aim, and he shot the pig. He killed it. He probably thought, that's the end of that. He could have known what a huge chain of events he had just started. Soon after, Charles Griffin found out. He was not happy. He confronted Cutlar. Griffin was angry that his pig had been killed. Cutlar, probably still feeling righteous about his potatoes, offered to pay for the pig. He was willing to be reasonable, but the offer wasn't enough for Griffin. Griffin demanded what Cutlar felt was an outrageous price. $10, maybe more. For one pig. Cutlar thought this was too much. It was more than the pig was worth. It felt like Griffin was trying to make a point. To assert his company's authority on the island. Cutlar, in turn, refused to pay the inflated price. This is where the famous exchange happened. Cutlar reportedly said, "It was eating my potatoes." Griffin supposedly replied, "It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig." This wasn't just about a pig anymore. It was about who had the right to be there. Whose laws applied, whose property was sacred. Was it an American's right to protect his crops? Or was it a British company's right to let its animals roam where they pleased? In a disputed territory, these questions took on a much larger meaning. Both men reported the incident. Cutlar told the local American authorities. Griffin immediately informed his superiors at the Hudson's Bay Company's headquarters in Fort Victoria. The news quickly traveled up the chain of command, and it landed on the desk of a man who was known for acting first and asking questions later, General William S. Harney. This pig had started something that would quickly grow out of control, something that could lead to war. The news of the pig and the dispute reached General William S. Harney. He was in command of the Department of Oregon. Harney was not a man known for his calm nature. He was a veteran of the Mexican-American War. He had a reputation for being aggressive. He was fiercely nationalistic. He saw any British presence in what he considered American territory as a direct challenge. And he was not one to back down. Harney didn't bother consulting with Washington, D.C. He acted fast. He saw the pig incident as a clear British provocation, a direct attack on American sovereignty. He believed British authorities were trying to bully American settlers off the island. This was exactly the kind of situation he felt he needed to address with force. On July 27, 1859, Harney issued an order. He sent Captain George Pickett and 66 U.S. soldiers to San Juan Island. Pickett was an ambitious officer. He was eager for glory. He would later become famous, or infamous, for Pickett's charge at Gettysburg during the Civil War. His mission was clear: protect American citizens, raise the American flag, and establish a strong military presence on the island. He was to repel all incursions by British authorities. Pickett landed on San Juan Island. He immediately set up camp. He hoisted the American flag. The message was unmistakable. America was here. And it wasn't leaving. Meanwhile, Charles Griffin had informed his superiors. Governor James Douglas received the news at Fort Victoria. Douglas was not just the governor of Vancouver Island. He was also the chief factor of the Hudson's Bay Company. He saw Pickett's arrival as an outright invasion, a violation of British territory. He was furious. Douglas wasted no time. He ordered 3 British warships to San Juan Island: HMS Tribune, HMS Pylades, and HMS Satellite. These were powerful vessels. They were under the command of Captain Jeffrey Hornby. Their mission was just as clear as Pickett's: remove the American forces. The British warships sailed into Griffin Bay. They dropped anchor. They trained their guns on Pickett's position. Pickett, with his small company of men, found himself facing down 3 formidable warships. But he didn't flinch. He refused to leave. He sent a message to the British commander. He stated that he was on American soil. He would defend his position. He would not be removed. The standoff began. The situation escalated rapidly. More American troops arrived from the mainland. They built fortifications. They brought cannons. General Harney sent even more reinforcements. By August, the numbers were staggering. There were over 400 American soldiers on the island. They had heavy artillery. Facing them were 5 British warships. The Royal Navy had dispatched more ships. These ships carried an estimated 2,000 men, and they had 140 guns. This was a serious force. Any one of these warships could have wiped out Pickett's small camp. The tension was immense. Both sides were ready to fire. Orders were given, then paused. The officers on the ground knew the stakes. They knew that firing the first shot could ignite a war between 2 major powers, a war that neither side wanted. The British captains, despite having overwhelming force, showed remarkable restraint. Governor Douglas, back in Fort Victoria, had given them orders not to fire first. But the temptation must have been immense. Pickett and his men stood firm, staring down the barrels of British guns. The world held its breath, or at least the small corner of the world that knew about this strange standoff. A pig had almost started a global conflict. The situation was a tinderbox. It only needed one spark. News of the standoff eventually reached the capitals. It traveled slowly, but when it arrived in Washington, D.C. and London, it caused a panic. Both governments were horrified. A war over a pig, and a remote, sparsely populated island. It seemed absurd. Neither nation wanted such a conflict. Britain had just come out of the Crimean War. It was a costly and bloody affair. The country was weary of war. Another major conflict was the last thing it needed. The United States, on the other hand, was teetering on the brink of its own internal crisis. The tensions between North and South were growing. The country was just 2 years away from the start of the Civil War. A war with Great Britain would be catastrophic. It would force America to fight on 2 fronts. It would weaken the Union just when it needed to be strong. President James Buchanan in Washington, D.C. acted quickly. He understood the gravity of the situation. He knew he needed someone calm and respected, someone who could defuse the crisis. He chose General Winfield Scott. Scott was a legendary figure, a hero of the Mexican-American War. He was old but wise, and he was known for his diplomatic skills, not just his military prowess. His mission was clear: go to the Pacific Northwest and avert war at all costs. General Scott arrived in the region in October 1859. He immediately began negotiations. He met with Governor James Douglas in Fort Victoria. Scott was a master negotiator. He didn't come in with threats. He came in with a plan. Scott proposed a compromise, a temporary solution, joint occupation. The idea was simple. Neither side would claim exclusive military control of San Juan Island. Both America and Britain would maintain a small military presence. A small garrison of soldiers. This would keep the peace on the island. It would also prevent either side from making a unilateral claim. It would buy time for a permanent solution to be found. Governor Douglas was a reasonable man. He also understood the danger of the situation. He saw the wisdom in Scott's proposal. He agreed. The immediate threat of war dissipated. The British warships pulled back from their aggressive positions. The American troops reduced their numbers. The tense standoff ended. A fragile truce settled over the San Juan Islands. This joint occupation lasted for 12 years. Both nations kept their small camps on the island. The American camp and English camp. They were just a few miles apart. The soldiers often socialized. They celebrated holidays together. It was a strange kind of peace, a peace enforced by mutual respect and the shared understanding that a border dispute wasn't worth a war. But the border still needed to be settled. The two nations agreed to arbitration. They needed a neutral third party to decide where the border truly lay. They chose Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany. He was seen as an impartial figure. Both countries presented their cases to him. Lawyers, diplomats, and cartographers laid out their arguments. They debated the exact meaning of the 1846 treaty. They discussed the geography of the channels. They presented historical maps and claims. Finally, in 1872, Kaiser Wilhelm I made his decision. He sided with the United States. And he ruled that the Haro Strait, the channel closer to Vancouver Island, was indeed the proper boundary. This meant the San Juan Islands officially became American territory. The dispute, which had simmered for decades and almost exploded into war, was finally over. The pig's legacy was complete. The story of the Pig War is more than just a quirky historical anecdote. It matters. It shows how easily disputes can escalate. A dead pig and a potato patch almost led to a major international conflict. It highlights the importance of good leadership, and it shows how crucial diplomacy is in moments of crisis. This almost war is often called the Bloodless War, and for good reason. Despite the massive buildup of forces, no shots were fired in anger between the two nations. No human lives were lost in the direct conflict. Only the unfortunate pig paid the ultimate price. This outcome was a testament to the restraint shown by officers on the ground and the wisdom of leaders like General Winfield Scott. The Pig War solidified the peaceful relationship between the United States and Great Britain along their shared border. It set a precedent. It showed that even serious disagreements could be resolved through negotiation and through arbitration, rather than through force. This commitment to peaceful resolution has endured. The U.S. and Canada, which is still part of the British Commonwealth, share the longest undefended border in the world. The Pig War was an early step in establishing that peaceful tradition. The role of individuals in this story is striking. General Harney's rashness almost sparked a war. General Scott's wisdom prevented it. Captain Pickett's determined stand showed courage. The British captain's restraint, despite having overwhelming force, showed even greater wisdom. These personalities shaped the events. They remind us that history is often driven by the choices of people. Today's San Juan Island remains a beautiful place. It is a popular tourist destination. It is also home to two national historical parks, American Camp and English Camp. Visitors can walk the grounds where soldiers from both nations once stood ready for battle. They can see the remains of the military installations. They can imagine the tension of that summer of 1859. These parks serve as a physical reminder of this unusual event. They teach us about a time when a simple misunderstanding could have led to catastrophe. The Pig War is a story for the ages. It's almost comical. A dead pig leading to gunboats and armies. But beneath the surface, it's a very serious tale. It's about sovereignty. It's about national pride. And it's about the fragile nature of peace. It's a reminder that even the smallest incidents can have huge implications if they are not handled with care. So the pig's legacy lives on. It is a symbol. A symbol of a border almost crossed into war. A war that was ultimately averted by common sense, by diplomacy, and by leaders who understood the true cost of conflict. The story of the Pig War is a powerful lesson. A lesson in restraint, a lesson in negotiation, and a lesson in how even the most unlikely animal can become a footnote in history. A very important footnote.